Hello, 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 and welcome to another SCOUTCAST, your midweek SCOUTCAST, halfway in between a game week because we do have a little bit of a wait before the next deadline, but that's absolutely fine because we're here to guide you through it. As always, you're joined by me, Andy, FPL Mode. That's right, the top million ranked Andy, FPL Mode, and we are also joined by the other people that have been in the top 1 mil for a little while now. Hibbo, how's it going, my man? Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
No worries. Hey, it's kind of good to put the indulgence of Christmas behind us. We had the turkey, we had the ham, we had far too many beer. Now it's kind of back to porridge. And I might have started the year 2025 with a red arrow, but I've qualified for the final of the FFS Cup. So unlucky to Shaballer, top player, my former manager in SKLW, but he just couldn't find enough to get past me this week. So unlucky, buddy.
You know, you've had a few red arrows when this is what you're clinching onto right now. I'm well impressed. But somebody that has not had to face a red arrow this week, Nacho, how's it going, my man? Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, very good to be here, mate. I love to see your rank at 999k just to get yourself just seeing that,
mate. So
that looks beautiful. But yeah, normality resumed here. Obviously, leading the way out of the three of us, another green arrow. Back to carrying the pod once again. So yeah, it's all been good.
Literally carrying us. I mean, just as well you're here because Hibbo and I are really struggled this year. So I'm really, really pleased that you're here with us this time, Nacho. I mean, Hibbo started well, didn't he? Do you remember he kind of peaked really early in FPL this year, whereas you've just kind of been that steady Eddie, haven't you?
I'm just that reliable. I said this before. I'm just that reliable Ford Fiesta that just gets you from A to B. I'm not that sports car. I'm not a flash in the pan, you know. But we'll clip that because end of the season when I'm sat a millionth, there'll be problems.
Nothing wrong with a millionth, mate. Nothing wrong with a millionth at all. Tom Johnson's in the chat, by the way, saying, Andy, you're about to overtake me. Thank you. Thank you. I'm on the up. I am on the up. Right, so we've got a little bit of a different pod for you tonight. We're not going to be looking at our scores. We're not going to be looking at our teams. We're not going to be looking at anything like that because this is midweek. And we thought, actually, do you know what? What can we do? What can we give you that's going to kind of tide you over until we get to the next deadline, which, of course, isn't for a little while yet because we've got a lot of other fixtures to go through. So we thought that we would give you who are the important players going to be over the next 8 game weeks? Who are the players that you're not even thinking about yet that everybody will be thinking about in a couple of weeks? And who are those differentials that might shoot you up the table in the next couple of game weeks as well? So that's what we thought we'd talk about. And to be honest, I know that if you're obsessed with FPL like we are, this is the kind of stuff you want to listen to. But before we go on to anything else, we got something to show you because FPL Scout have been nominated for the Sports Podcast Awards. We would love for you to vote for us, please. So make sure you go on and the link's in the description and vote for us if you can. Basically, it's for the Scoutcast, isn't it? Because let's be honest, we're better than all the other ones on Scout. You know, deadline dilemmas and all that stuff. Now, it's all about the Scoutcast. So vote for us if you can. I'm joking, by the way. Vote for us if you can. We would absolutely love it if you could. We will put this on again next week when we've got a few more people listening. So I know it's obviously a bit of a quieter week because everybody's having a bit of a break. But if you can vote for us, that'll be absolutely fantastic. I've been doing this now for about 3 years, and it's the first time I think I've done this on the stream saying, could you vote for us? Because I don't think we've been nominated before. So thank you so much for anybody that has nominated us. Now that we've got Hibbo and Nacho on, we've obviously gone up in the echelons and we're nomination worthy. So thank you so much. So well done, boys. I'm going to say it's mainly down to you two. Hibbo, is there anything you want to say to your adoring public about voting for us?
No, I wouldn't sell yourself short, Andy. I think you're the rock that keeps us going. Do you know what I mean? Like you know, you're the ship that sails us through that dark night. Like so, no,
sinking like a rock.
No,
no, cheers. But and Nacho, anything you want to say to our lovely public that are here with us every week?
Yeah, no, if you can, guys, vote. I am literally the guy at university who turns up on the day and asks, has everyone done all the work sort of thing. So I am getting carried on this. So you boys have smashed it. And yeah, if you can vote, guys, obviously do so.
Don't you love that? He's saying that at the same time as he's top rank out of all of us as well. So he's sat there going, yeah, I don't do much, but I'm killing it.
I'm like, I turn up and I just lean over and go, you've done the work. Can I have that, please? And then just...
No, you're smashing it this season. It's been absolutely lovely already. And what are we? Game week 21 we're looking at. So we're more than halfway through. and we're looking forward to finishing the season off with everybody that's out there. People saying about your accent must be helping as well, Hippo.
Hippos.
So let's.
You'll have to kind of cut out of my pork life now.
Oh dear. Bel Saru says, "Yous have been brilliant, lads. Really enjoyed listening all season. Cheers to you. No worries. Thank you so much." And Alan says, "Hi guys. Best regards. Top 50k player. Lovely stuff. We can bring you on next year if you like for Hibbo. Right. Let's have a look at our." Let's have a look at who we think are the most important players over the next 8 game weeks. And this is based on their projected points from the Scout members area. And as you can see, obviously, we've got players on here that a lot of us are going to already own. So, for instance, Mo Salah is at the top there. He is the top projected player over the next 8 game weeks, including what we are projecting to be a double game week in game week 24, which is why game week 24's stats are a little bit inflated compared to the others. So Salah is top. He's got 71 projected points over the next 8 game weeks.
Crazy.
The next one is Cole Palmer, who's on 60 points. So 11 points between the both of them, but there is a double in there as well. Now, we've got lots of players on this table, and what I'm going to do is basically I'm going to go through the table. I'm not going to ask both of you about every single player because I feel like that's silly and that's not really what people want. But every time we get to an interesting player, I'm going to talk to you about it. So the first one up on the list that we're going to talk about is a player that's in third. He is 15 points behind Palmer in terms of projected points over the next 8 game weeks on 45 points, which is Haaland. Haaland is that you wouldn't think that he was as low as he is in terms of ownership. But Nacho, is there a case to be said that Haaland is so low owned now that if you wanted to, over the next 8 game weeks, really propel yourself up, do you see a world where owning Haaland is what we should be doing moving forward?
Well, I'm just looking right now, 30% owned in the game. Obviously, we're not really sure exactly what the active ownership is on him. So I think there's quite a few maybe dead teams with him. And third on the list, we're always expecting that with someone like Erling Haaland when he plays in a Man City team. And are we seeing the return of Man City? I'm still not convinced right now. Based on the teams that they've played, I think any team can come back to form with the games that they've had recently. And with the fixtures coming up over the foreseeable future for Man City, I still cannot sit here and make a case for Erling Haaland. I think a few things. One, the amount of surgery that you need to do to your team in order to accommodate someone like an Erling Haaland in that front line is just ridiculous. Like, you need a lot of transfers in the bank. The games coming up, including Chelsea, Arsenal, Newcastle, Liverpool, in a 4 in a row is woeful. And we're seeing forwards this season. We spoke about it before we went live about players who are half the price who are delivering as good points. Yeah. And the money that you can allocate to the rest of the squad is just crazy. So I love the people that are going Haaland because it's different and it makes it exciting. But I just can't sit here and force people to go there.
Yeah, I think if you were wildcarding this week, Nacho, he wouldn't be anywhere near it still, would he?
Oh, I don't think he could. I love Brentford and Ipswich in isolation for fixtures. But he's in to then come straight back out in game week, 23, 24. And I just don't think it is worthwhile. There's so many decent-ish value forwards in the game.
Yeah, and speaking of value forwards, you got Isak, who's next on the list, who's only 2 points lower than Haaland, and he seems to be the premium striker that we're all going for now. But 5th on this list, Trent Alexander-Arnold, 41 points projected. Obviously, there's a double in there as well. The most expensive defender in the game. Hibbo, we were talking before we even started streaming here, saying that it seems like Trent could be a little bit of an issue moving forward with Conor Bradley being there, with the Real Madrid talks being there, with the fact that he played quite badly against Manchester United, apparently got chewed out a little bit by Virgil afterwards as well. When you're looking at somebody like that, who is that expensive, but he's got a double game week and he's playing for the team that are comfortably best team in the league at the moment, what's your thoughts on Trent moving forward over these next 8 weeks?
He's probably, for me, I don't buy, don't sell.
Yeah.
He had a bad game. I don't think anybody can dispute that. Like we talked about it before we came on air. The only thing that kind of confused me a bit is that Slot, and you give the reasons for that Slot didn't change it up a wee bit sooner, because it was clear from earlier in the game that he couldn't really shake off the fact that he was having a bad game. And Bradley could have maybe came on around 60 or 70 minutes. Does that potentially lead to Trent throwing ahead during the international break? Because he's obviously wanted by Real Madrid. Do Liverpool want to try and see if they can keep him? It seems to me as if that's too far gone. It seems to me as if He's destined to go to Real Madrid. That's where he's going to go. But I think we see a lot of overreaction, and we've seen a lot of overreaction over the weekend past from the fantasy community, because people are like, oh, is Bradley now going to take his minutes? Is he going to now be rested all of a sudden? And I don't think so. I don't agree. Like, I think we're looking at Liverpool, and we're looking at Trent and Salah are both in kind of quite similar positions. Now, Salah's obviously wrapping it up. He's been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Trent has been good for most of the season, but I do think from time to time he drops like a 2 out of 10 stink bomb performance.
Yeah.
And now, because he's been linked away, he's been linked to Real Madrid, the spotlight's on him as a fantasy asset. But no, I wouldn't buy him. I definitely wouldn't sell him. But I wouldn't put too much credence in this kind of possibility that he's going to suddenly lose minutes, because where I see him losing minutes is in the EFL Cup and in the FA Cup.
Yeah.
I do think that Slot could maybe take him out of the firing line, put Bradley in for those games. Bradley does deserve some kind of minutes. Bradley could reduce his minutes slightly. So, like, maybe in games Trent could play 70. Trent could play, the mid-60s instead. And I don't think that's a bad thing from like a clean sheet perspective, because you could nearly lock your clean sheet down early from a fantasy sense, and Liverpool then bust their clean sheet after he's gone off. I don't mind that. So no, I'm not really kind of getting caught up in the whole hype that he's suddenly a sell. Definitely not ahead of, like, if we're going to have a double game week in 24, I think you hold on and you keep him in your team.
That's the thing. I mean, the other thing with him is obviously you're not going to be wanting to buy him now, because the next two fixtures are not kind. And you're looking at the next two fixtures and thinking, not really sure what I'm going to be expecting from him from those two. But like you just said there, I don't really think he's a buy. I don't think he's a sell, but he's definitely one to keep an eye on. But in that double game week, I feel like you're going to be a little bit annoyed if you don't have him going into that double game week, because he is the one you want. But Nacho, we were talking earlier, do you think there's a possibility that he misses one of those games in the doubles? And, people are going to be spending a lot of money on a player that's just going to have a single game week.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's it, really. I'm a bit more probably worried about Trent than maybe others. I do think that there is a chance that we could see reduced minutes at times. I'm just looking at the fixtures right now, and I just don't know what narrative you want to go with, really. We got EFL Cup, FA Cup. That could be 2 Bradley starts, and then Trent starts the next 2 league games. They're basically through in the Champions League, so they could be Bradley games, but then it's Ipswich at home. So then you could say that could be a Bradley game. The big thing for me is we don't really know right now. And I think that's enough of a reason to just sit tight, keep Trent for the Nottingham Forest game 100%. If he drops another stinker, then we might have to come to the conclusion that maybe the performances will reflect reduced minutes. The only thing I will say is with Konaté's return at 5.1 million, if you're in a position where your team value is bad, I wouldn't rule out around the Brentford game or the Ipswich game, if you need to free up funds, Trent down to Konaté to then allocate it to maybe an improvement in your forwards. But I agree with Hibbo. I would say keep for now, reassess after the Forest game. If he drops another stinker, then we maybe have another conversation on the Scoutcast, of course.
Because what's also weird this year is that potentially going into that double game week, you might not have to have 3 Liverpool players, because you could have Arnie Slot. You could have the assistant manager chip and play Arnie Slot, couldn't you? Obviously, you want to do double game week and you want to play a chip, most probably. But the assistant manager chip is there as well. So there's always that to think about too, which I know we are going to be talking about very soon on Scoutcast in terms of chip strategy. Bruno Fernandes is next up on this list, 41.9, just below Trent Alexander-Arnold. Hibbo, is this the perfect week to get on Bruno if you can get him from, say, a Semenyo or something like that? What do you think?
I do think so, because like we were looking at the weekend and there was a lot of fume on the socials about penalty takers, and like people were surprised that penalty takers actually scored penalties. And Bruno Fernandes he's the king of fantasy penalty league. But the form's been good. Like if we look at his last 10 games, he scored 9 points or more on 4 occasions over those 10 games. And I think he scored 65 points in total. So like say 6.5 points per game, and that includes a game where he was red carded and he had a -2. So like for a player that started the season so slow, he's all of a sudden kind of picked up form. He's obviously got the minutes, he's obviously got the penalties. United are a team in flux. I think you're a United fan, Andy, and I think you would agree with that, where he's had the big result against Man City, he's had a good result against Liverpool. In fairness, Harry Maguire should have won it for these at the very end. He's have fallen down against the lesser team, so I think Amarin has to prove that he basically isn't like a wish version of Mourinho, but he's now have the fixtures where, regardless of Amarin and regardless of a team, I think Bruno's a good asset. And I think if we look at him in this fixture at home to Southampton, whisper it quietly. People like to whisper quietly in the fantasy community. Whisper it quietly. He's a captaincy option this week. Nobody else say it. Nobody else say it. He's a captaincy option this week because Southampton are terrible. And I saw some kind of narrative on FPL Twitter where people seem to think Southampton were a good team again.
Yeah.
They've never been good. They
had a bit of
thought
an
they had
uptick.
some kind of bounce. No, they're terrible. They're terrible. Southampton are terrible. Ipswich are terrible. Leicester are terrible. They're so far removed from everything else in the league. And then I saw some narrative where people are like, "Oh, we thought Southampton were better," and you're like, "No, boys, no."
Oh, I tell you what, high-pitched Hibbo is my new favourite thing.
Yeah, that was a new one. That was beautiful.
That was brilliant. So, I mean, Bruno as well, you know, I had a really good point then. I can't remember what it was. But no, I do think it's interesting with
First
Bruno.
time
They're
this
obviously,
season.
I know, God. What, the forgetting or the having a good point?
Having a good point.
Yeah, I know. I do think it's an interesting one with Bruno. And I think the big thing with Bruno that always sticks in my head is that I just keep thinking he's 10 mil. I just keep thinking he's still that premium price, but he's not now. He's like 8.5-ish, isn't he? And it's you're looking at it and thinking that's not a bad price for a player that's on penalties for a team that should be attacking, but obviously they haven't been great this season. But I do think that over this kind of period, if you can get to a Bruno, I think he's a good player to have there. But the other issue is that as you get further down this list, there are those other midfielders for cheaper that look better. And I'm going to skip past a few here. So Nicholas Jackson was next. There's Watkins there as well. We might talk about those in a minute. But there's Odegaard, there's Luis Diaz, there's Eze, and there's Mbumo that are all on this list, all around just above 35 points over the next 8 game weeks. Now, if we're looking at it, Bruno Fernandes, Eze, and Mbumo's just dropped a 19-pointer, Nacho. If you had to choose, if you didn't have any of these players at the moment, I don't have any of those players at the moment. If you had to pick between Bruno, Eze, and Mbumo to own over these 8 game weeks or to bring in next, who do you think you'd be bringing in out of those lot?
Okay, so I think Bruno Fernandes is really, really attractive, especially for the next 2, Southampton and Brighton. I do think he probably would be top just because he does possess a captaincy option in game week 21, which is something we need to obviously take into account. I would probably have Mbumo over Eze myself just because of the penalties is a big factor. I think Mateta is still taking them in that Palace team. I will say, though, after watching the Crystal Palace games and watching against Chelsea, another day he scores a sitter and he's picking up some really interesting positions. Like Mateta is basically playing very central, and then it's just Sa and Eze playing alongside him, and then the width is being taken up by Mitchell and Munoz. So I think we will say cream rides to the top with players. I think Eze is a perfect example of that. He's had a poor start to the season. I would not be surprised if he had a strong end to the season, but I would probably have a third on this list. I just think Mbumo on penalties, and I think the City game is actually a perfectly fine game for game week 21 with what we've seen with City so far.
I feel like those people that kept Mbumo are just reaping the rewards. And Brentford are just continuing to do what they're doing. Wiss has obviously been a shout. He's not even on this list, but Wiss has been absolutely incredible so far this season. And I'm looking at it and thinking, Hibbo, why is it that lots of us are like, but we're always going to play the fixtures, and obviously Mbumo's fixtures maybe aren't the best for the next couple of weeks, but he is the one that's smashing it every week. It's like Wood, isn't it? Wood isn't on this list, and he's the one smashing it every week as well. So what do you think about Mbumo, Eze, or Bruno if you had to bring one in now? And I've said all of these, by the way. Haven't even talked about Gordon, who's just 2 down from Mbumo for the next 8 game weeks projection wise,
and scored tonight.
No, who did? Gordon?
Yeah, just scored 2-0 there.
Right. I think Mbumo, I'm going to file him under the same category as Trent. Like, if you have him, you keep him, obviously. He's been very good for the people that have kept him. I think when we looked at the fixtures at the point in time, there was an argument to sell him. He's obviously completely smashed it up. I would never in a million years buy him before Man City and Liverpool. Never.
Yeah.
Like, despite Man City's flunk and despite the fact that they've dropped down a wee bit defensively in terms of what we're seeing, goals conceded and stuff like that, I would never buy them against two teams that are traditionally like 2 of the top teams in the division. So I think he's third for me out of those 2. Bruno or Eze, it's like comparing apples and pears because they're different price points. I agree with Nacho. I watched the past Chelsea game and I thought Eze was good. I think if he had scored a goal, like so much of the thinking around him would be very different because you'd be suddenly looking at back-to-back kind of double-digit hauls and you'd be thinking, he's potentially a really good asset going on like a run of fixtures where I think he sits top for us on the Scouts fixture ticker over the next 6. But I think if you're asking me to nail me colours to a mast, I'm going to say Bruno Fernandes, and it's mostly down to that Southampton fixture. I think Southampton at home is just a fixture at the minute which could be 5-6, 7-0, and at home to Brighton. Like I do like Brighton, I like Brighton, but I think defensively they can be a wee bit leaky as well. So I think there's a couple of games coming up that United could really target, and that I do think Bruno could be impressive on. But different price point. I could buy either one this week. I'm kind of torn. If I'm buying Bruno, I have to buy him for Odegaard, who has just been crap. He obviously missed the game at the weekend. Or I could keep Odegaard and go like Semenyo to Eze, which could be, you're going to see a couple of popular moves this week. I think one of the most popular will be, despite his point scoring, I think a lot of people will go Bumo to Bruno.
Yeah. I think Bruno will be popular. I think people are going to be reminded. I think people are going to be reminded about penalties, aren't they? And people are going to be thinking there's going to be an awful lot of penalties again, and so they're going to be getting on like a Bruno. If Eze was on pens, I think it'd be a no-brainer. But like Nacho just said there, I think it's still up in the air about him and Mateta, isn't it?
It could be on pens, but this is Mateta's took one when he's in the pitch, so that's kind of unresolved. And I think it's going to take a next penalty for us to know what's happening at Palace, like who's taking spot kicks. But it could be one of those where you just grab Eze and hope you get lucky. Like you grab him, you buy him. He's not a bad asset if he's got 50% of penalties, but there's a chance that he maybe takes them all. Let's see. We know Bruno has 100% penalty. The odd time he likes to gift Rashford one, but
that's not going to happen now. Yeah. And Nacho, you think if you've got Mbumo and you're looking to move him to Bruno, that's a mistake, do you?
I think we always have this conversation about Mbumo. Like I was thinking about this a couple of weeks ago when I decided to sell him, and I just think we saw with Bruno, like he played in the front three and then went into the centre mid role. And with Mbumo, you're getting him right side of a front three that sometimes goes into a front two in games. And I just think, have I seen anything from City and Liverpool over the last month to suggest he can't score in either of those fixtures? I think the answer is no. So, and then they got Spurs, West Ham, Leicester, Everton. I think if you have Mbumo, you just keep long term. I really would.
Yeah, I get it, and I think it's one of those. Players where if you've got him, like you said, keeping him is probably what most people should do. But I think people are going to chase that kind fixture, aren't they, with Bruno?
What if he's had? Just I'll pose like a hypothetical question. What if he's had Odegaard or Bumo? Which one would you sell first?
If you had Odegaard easily.
Yeah, definitely Odegaard. Yeah.
I sold Odegaard last week for Gordon. Couldn't be happier.
You guys know I hate Odegaard as a pick. I would sell him in a heartbeat, but I'm probably quite biased on
that. Hibbo's thinking about it now. The other thing I wanted to mention before we go on to some differentials, by the way, we got how many strikers we got on here? We got 8 strikers on here. We got Haaland, Isak, Nicholas Jackson, Watkins. They're all above 35 for projections. Below 35, Solanke, Gakpo, and then Jesus and Mateta are closer to 30. We haven't got Wood on here. We haven't got Wisser on here. The question I'm going to ask both of you, because I'm not enamoured by a lot of these strikers. It seemed like we had so many options not that long ago, and now it feels like it's kind of dried up quite a bit. But we do have Isak and Wood that are delivering most weeks, and we've got, say, a Pedro or a Jimenez or someone like that that's cheaper that people are invested in and done quite well from. Even Delap, who seems to be doing quite well at the moment as well and is on penalties. My question to you two is, who is going to be the next striker that people don't really own at the moment, but who's going to be the next striker that people are clamouring for? So 5-6 game weeks ago, if you'd have said Isak, you'd have hit that nail on the head. But who's going to be that next striker, do you think? Looking at these projections, it's apparently going to be Haaland, but we've already said that's going to be too expensive, most probably. So who do you think the next one's going to be? And I'm going to go to you first, Nacho.
Oh, damn you.
Yeah, sorry.
I am going to say... I really want to say Gakpo. Like, I really want to say Gakpo because the minutes, I've just got his numbers up here, and his actual starts have been fantastic. Like, he has started so many games over the last couple of months, but he is a player that comes off around 17 minutes, which is not ideal. But he's in great form right now. And the fixtures, apart from game week 21 against Forest, Brentford, Ipswich, double and 24, 25, I think the fixture are amazing. Now, do I think Gakpo ticks all the boxes that I want from a forward? No, not on penalties, no guaranteed minutes. So I would love to go there if I was chasing a mini league. Outside of that, I think the fact that I am trying to pluck one out of the air suggests to me that there is no obvious one right now, unless Hibbo's got one that I'm completely missing. I just think it is quite clear right now that an Isak, Wood, João Pedro 3 is quite a comfortable 3 to go for the foreseeable. And you know how much I love João Pedro.
Yeah, exactly. Hibbo, who's your choice, mate?
I think it's a wee bit up in the air, to be honest. Like, I think Isak's obviously, he's nailed himself to the point of being like essential, and I don't really like using the word essential. I think in fantasy it's overused, but for him it's completely correct. João Pedro's also essential.
Just stop it.
But if we have to pick a third option, I think if we have to pick a third option, Wood's obviously been on fire. He's got Liverpool next. They're good. Like they're nearly kind of like your boring best front three at the minute, I would say. How many has a bit of a shout? But I think if you're going to pick a striker that's a wee bit off the beaten track, I would say potentially Matera, because like Nacho's mentioned, he could be in penalties. The next three for Matera are about as good as it gets. Like, he's got Leicester away, West Ham away, Brentford at home. He's got United away, but then in the fixtures ahead, he has Everton, Fulham, Aston Villa, Ipswich, and he's even got Southampton around about game week 30 if he managed to hold them that long. Now, he's a wee bit under the radar, but if it was to turn out that he takes the penalties and Eze doesn't take the penalties, if Crystal Palace get a penalty and Matera stands up and takes the ball off him again, treats him like a wee boy, throws him to the side. That's what he did. That's what he did.
Why don't you get both then? You don't have to worry about it then.
You could get both, but it would be like super differential. I think they have both, but like I think Matera's potentially an outside of the box pick. I know Andy Martin's got him. I think it's a great shout.
Oh God, no! Don't go there.
If the penalty share goes up, I think he's a really good option.
So,
Nacho, who did you go with? Gakpo.
I said Gakpo. I don't love it. I think my conclusion is probably just I just think cheap option is still the route to go for, because I think the midfielders are still fantastic. Yeah. And I just think Mateta's great if you've got great team value. Otherwise, I would come down. Even my boy Vissa, because what I love about him is you can bench him in those tough games and you don't feel any guilt about it. And you can play your fifth midfielder.
Nice. And Hibbo, you're going for Mateta?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nice. I'm going to just go different to you two then. I would have gone Mateta as well, I think, but I'm going to go with Delap. I think Delap on penalties as well. I think Delap's done really well this year, and Ipswich look like they could stay up. So I think Delap's going to be my pick. He's cheap as anything as well, like probably the cheapest we've mentioned out of all these strikers. So I'm going to go Delap myself. And if we're looking at these penalties being as essential as they are, then I think he's a good pick. Mateta, most likely on penalties, and Gakpo, obviously, I don't think he's anywhere near them if Salah's not on the pitch, because I'm assuming McAllister would have them after him potentially. But yeah, so that's the way I'm going. But very, very interesting there. We got some differentials, by the way, to show you, and this is a lovely little table, wee little table that Hibbo's put together for us. And this is showing the top 100k ownership on one axis, and then total expected points over the next, how many weeks is that one, Hibbo?
This is 8 game weeks, so it's running the same way as our X points. So it's running up to game week 28, including game week 28.
Lovely. So what we're really wanting is for somebody to be quite low down on this table, but quite far to the right, because what that means is they're not owned by anybody, but they're expected to get quite a lot of points. Now, Haaland is right up the top here, because he's obviously so expensive. People aren't owning him, and in the top 100k, you'll be hard-pressed to find anybody owning him. I think he's only about 4% owned here. Bruno Fernandes is probably next on this table, is worth mentioning. We've obviously spoken about both of those already tonight. Bruno Fernandes only owned about 10%. above the top 100k, but he's expected to get quite a lot over the next 8 game weeks. Then we've got Son, Odegaard, and Eze is quite high up on this. He's expected to get about around midway, so about just over 38 points over the next 8, but he's only owned by about 6%. But then you get on to players like Luis Diaz, Jackson, who are owned by around 20%, 25%. Gordon, Pedro, who are up the top there, but not expected to get as many points. You've got players like Solanke, Foden, Jota, De Bruyne, Unal, who, by the way, Evan Nilsson is now injured and will be missing quite a significant amount of time. I was talking about this with the guys before we came on. My mate, as a Bournemouth fan, says they're most likely going to try and sign a striker. Unal is not Evan Nilsson, and Evan Nilsson is incredibly important to how this Bournemouth team play. So I don't think he's going to be a very good replacement for him, but we'll see how he gets on. Alisson, Robertson, Martinelli, Virgil van Dijk, Ahmad, Sarr and Raya are all on this list as differentials that are under 40% owned. All of these are under 35% owned, actually. But Nacho, I'm going to go to you first. You've got this whole list here, this whole beautiful graph that Hibbo's made for us. If you had to name one of these players that you think, do you know what? I know people talk about differentials in lots of different ways, but if you had to pick one of these players that you thought, I want to pick one of these now, I'm going to keep him in my team for a couple of weeks, and I think he could do quite well when nobody else owns him, or just get the price rises and everybody else owns him in a couple of weeks, who do you think it would be? And is it going to be anybody on this table? You can pick someone else if you want to.
Yeah, I think outside of Eze, who we've already spoken about, player that we didn't even think about in the forward department is Solanke. Like, I don't love him, but I do look at their fixtures coming up. I know Arsenal away is not ideal, but North London derby, anything can happen. And then Everton, Leicester, Brentford, United, Ipswich. I mean, probably a bit more love is needed for him. Now, I spoke about, obviously, with price points, whether you had the value to have an Isak and then a mid-price alongside that. But we know Spurs score goals regardless of their state right now. And I do like Solanke as a bit of a differential. Like, if we're talking about true differential over the next 6 game weeks, for example, I think he's one definitely to consider for our teams. But would I ever pick him right now over a Chris Wood or that? I just wouldn't. So it comes back to it. I think a realistic player for managers to go to this week onwards would be someone like an Eze. Bit of a broken record, but I still think he's fantastic.
Yeah. What about you, Hibbo?
Like, I thought this made for interesting reading, and I think, you know, when we're looking at it in kind of table form, and then we're looking at it now in the kind of graph format, I think you don't have to look too far to find your differentials, is what I would say, because, you know, quite often we kind of think to ourselves we need to reinvent the wheel. They make picks for a fantasy team that are going to shoot us up the rankings, but like in reality, Salah everybody owns, Palmer everybody owns, Isak everybody owns, but whenever you come outside those kind of 3 almost essential players at the minute, lots of the players that we're talking about, well, we expect them to score well over the next kind of 7-8 weeks. They're also quite low owned because you do have Bruno in the mix, you do have Eze in the mix, you do have like a Solanke, but I think if you were asking me to kind of throw my hat in somebody, I would say Bruno. Like, you know, you're looking at the graph there and you're thinking, how many is he actually owned by? Is kind of what, roughly kind of 10% or maybe just a wee bit under. So that if we think about how big a score he could potentially hit against somebody like Southampton, if he's coming at around 10%, like, I do think there's a chance they make gains when you consider like United's fixtures over the next maybe 7-8 weeks.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think Bruno and Eze kind of really stick out there, and I think Solanke, like you said, Nacho, is an interesting one, but it's tough to fit him in, like you said, in terms of how everybody's forward lines are shaping up anyway. I think you've got some other interesting midfielders there in Martinelli and Ahmad. I think Ahmad is still doing well for United. We've been mentioning Bruno, and he's obviously way cheaper than Bruno is, so I think he is obviously there. Pedro, I think we've talked about enough on this stream this year, but somebody that isn't even on this graph and has killed it. I think they've got 27 points in the last 2 weeks and plays for arguably one of the best teams in the league, is Savio for Man City. He is doing really well, and he seems nailed in that role at the moment. It's just Pep's been a bit funny with him, but I think he's somebody that you can definitely have on your watch list and you can maybe invest in as well, because I would still put him up there with an Ahmad or a Martinelli or someone like that. I think I would put obviously Bruno ahead of him, but I think Eze I'd probably put a little bit ahead of him as well. But I think Savio is somebody that, you know, not a lot of people own. I don't even know what his live ownership is at the moment, but it would be under 3%, I would have thought.
Yeah, 3%.
Yeah. So I think he's somebody that you can chuck in a hat as well and maybe take a pick on. But when we're talking about differentials, we're obviously talking. You don't have to pick differentials to do well in FPL. Obviously, we're just trying to make it a bit more exciting, thinking about what you could maybe pick when it's a bit of a boring week because there's nothing going on.
His
lovely
numbers
stuff.
are amazing.
Savio's
are amazing. Yeah, his expected goal involvement when he actually does feature are really good.
Yeah, I know.
Really good. One to think about, definitely.
Yeah, he's somebody that started coming across my radar at the beginning of the week, and then obviously dropped another great week. I think he had 14 points this week, and it was looking at he started to jump out at me a little bit. But yeah, he's an interesting one because people I think are going to think back to the Mahrez days, and obviously you invest in someone like that, and then he gets dropped for the next 2 games, doesn't he? So it is a tough pick sometimes, but yeah, he's somebody that's on my radar anyway. Right, let's go back to the intro screen because I think we've got about 200 people that were in the chat at one point, which is not bad for a quiet night before a deadline with the Arsenal game going on as well. Maybe all the Arsenal fans have come to join us. Chuck in your questions. This is, if you normally try and chuck in questions, this is the best time to do it because there's hardly anybody else on. So we will try and answer as many questions as possible in the next 5 minutes. Cedar Stuff says, outside the last 2 weeks, Savio has been producing 1s, 2s and 3s for 9 weeks. He has indeed, but I'm trying to pick somebody that you might not already think might do very well.
and minutes have been obviously sporadic there. That's the huge factor you do take into account with him.
Yeah, big time. And the other thing with City is obviously they've got a lot of fixtures coming up and they have to do well in Champions League. And they've got, so does he play in those ones and then gets his minutes managed in the league? It's a tough one there. Right, Michael Scott Jackson has 1 return since week 13 and is not on penalties. How long do we remain patient waiting for him to hit the barn door? Hibbo.
I don't think stay patient at all. Like, you know, you could look at Jackson and you could think to yourself, you look at his upcoming fixtures and I think he's got Bournemouth, I think he's got Wolves in the next 2, which aren't bad. They're two home games. But like we have so much kind of depth in that kind of striker pool at the minute. You know, if he's constantly going to underperform, his minutes aren't maybe as good as what they were. Like, you know, sometimes he's playing 70 odd minutes, sometimes he's playing 35 if he subs on. So I think he's probably a player that you could keep for the next 2 depending on the fixtures, but I wouldn't be surprised if you wanted to sell him given the fact that Wood's tearing it up, João Pedro's world class, Isaac's world class. And, you know, you've got people like Matera kind of coming on the scene as well.
Pedro, man.
Goodness me.
This guy.
Pedro propaganda. Frostbolter says, Virgil seems to be predicted to be high, but would you still select him for the next 8 weeks, Nacho? Would you ever consider Virgil van Dijk, or is it Konate or Trent for you?
Yeah, for me, it is very much a case of Trent or Konate. I know Konate's got a bit of a history of injuries, but when I looked at the numbers in terms of attack and output, there isn't enough in Virgil's favour to pay the additional 1.3 million. So for me, it would be Konate over Virgil if you want to get a centre back in that team.
Yeah. Although I will say in a double game week, it's a defender like Virgil that gets a bullet header, isn't it? And ends up with like 20 odd points, isn't it? Alex Mason, I'm currently in the top 100k. Do you advise going for high ownership players to maintain rank, or do I go for punts? What do you think, Hibbo?
Just keep playing as best as you can every week.
Yeah.
I know that sounds like boring advice, but I think playing the game where like you're considering ownership, whether the players are really highly owned or really low owned, ahead of like what you actually think of the player, I think that's fallacy. I wouldn't do it. I would pick the players that you think are going to score best, regardless of whether they're highly owned or whether they're low owned. Because if you start thinking about, say, rank protection, like we're just past the midway point. Like rank protection, if you want to do that, going on to game week 38, game week 37. But now at this, everything's to play for. So I think if you're thinking about protecting your rank, you're maybe going to miss opportunities to say, look, I'm going to jump on an Eze, I'm going to jump on a Mattel, I'm going to jump on Bruno Fernandes for these nice fixtures where they're really low owned. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah, sorry, I thought you were going to say another bit there. No. Heather says, do I buy Eze or Bruno for the longer term, Nacho? So if you wanted to pick one to own for quite a few weeks, who would you be picking?
Firstly, a bit of a cop-out here, but it does come down to your long-term plans because you are paying, like 1.52 million more for Bruno. So you do need to take that into account. It isn't just a straight pick. Again, I'm really bullish on Eze, but the fact that Bruno's on penalties, I think if you have the funds available, I'd rather go Bruno to then come down to Eze rather than go Eze to then be clambering to Bruno eventually.
Yeah. Nice. Ti says, do I play Fabianski over Sells this week? And what is your early captaincy thought, Hibbo? So do you play Fabianski over Sells? Obviously, Sells has got Liverpool, hasn't he?
And they might have a new manager.
Who's West Ham playing?
Fulham at home.
Oh, you play Fabianski, but Areola's been starting, but I think you could just do that anyway and hope that you get a start, but you're probably not going to get a start in Sales. But Sales has been going well. What was the second part of his question again, sorry?
Captaincy thought.
Oh, it's tough this week. Wide open. I think Salah, I think if you're going to back against Salah, it could be potentially this week because Forest have been going well. They've been a bit of a bogey side for Liverpool. In the first game, they had worked flat out to a certain extent. It's obviously away from home. And there's lots of kind of live options this week. Whereas, like, if we're looking at the fixtures, obviously United have Southampton, Bruno Fernandes. Brighton have Ipswich, João Pedro. But if I'm being serious, Isaac at home to Newcastle or Isaac at home to Wolves, that's a really good fixture. And I do think you could make a case for Palmer at home to Bournemouth. But I think if I was going to go slightly outside the box, it would probably be Isaac, to be honest.
Are Forest that good that we're not captaining Salah this week then?
Don't know. We'll see we'll see come next week because like
It's
everybody's
mad,
full of big talk and you know, oh, we'll take on the captaincy. Come on, boys. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
Come on.
One push exactly,
Come
but one
on.
push comes to shove. Where's the balls? Like who's going to put them down the table and say, "Oh, I'm going to fade him against Forest." Forest have been good, but it depends whether you're really brave enough to say, "I'm happy to slam it on Isaac," or "I'm happy to." Say, it would be a big brave call. I think the way the models will have it going on, they like I say, scouts rate my team projections. They'll have it tight. Some models will have Salah behind. So what you're going to see, certain model players, I think, will take on the Salah captaincy this week. So it'll be interesting to see that way.
What do you think, Nacho? I know this is early, but what do you think?
I think Liverpool beat Forest. I think they got too much in the locker. I think Forest on a great run, but I still think they're not a top bracket team. I think they're on a great run right now.
Were Forest depleted at all when City thrashed them? They beat them 3-0, didn't they?
I can't remember the lineup in that one. I can't remember the lineup.
Because I look at that, and obviously they were doing okay before that as well. And I just feel like when they go up against someone like that, they might obviously struggle. But I love it when you get to a week like this, and obviously Salah's been killing it, where you can go against Salah. Like it does feel, it was the same with Haaland, wasn't it, all those years? And I just look at it and think maybe this is one of those weeks. And you know, you do have Palmer, you've got Isak, you've got Bruno that have lovely fixtures. It's an interesting one to think about, but obviously that decision might be made for us by next week because there's a lot of games to play before next week. And I should say, by the way, because I've seen people on the timeline saying they've made their moves already. I think you're absolutely mental if you're making moves already. It's like some teams are playing twice before the next game week. Did you find it, Nacho?
Yeah, they had a pretty strong team, to be honest with you. They had usual back four. They were just missing Anderson in midfield, and they had Jota on the left as opposed to Hudson-Odoi.
Yeah, okay.
In the start, yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for the people in the chat that dropped us in. And thank you so much as well for having almost 200 people here as well. Really, really enjoy that. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. I know it's a bit of a shorter one, but we wanted to give you one to kind of tide you over before the next deadline. Thank you as well, by the way, for people that are watching after this and people listening on the pod. And if you are, make sure you vote for us in the Sports Podcast Awards. We'll put it back up here. Here it is. Okay, make sure you vote for us because we really appreciate all of you voting for us. We're very excited. Hibbo, thanks so much for joining us this evening. I've gone to you first, which has thrown me off a bit. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Hope you enjoyed yourself.
Always a pleasure, buddy. Nice quick one tonight.
It was. And Nacho, thanks so much for joining us as well, buddy.
Yeah, it was good. I actually enjoyed them ones that kind of like deep dive into just like generic topics. And we're back Monday, am I right in saying?
Monday, aye.
Monday for the Tuesday deadline. So yeah, I feel like that is going to be a big one. So anyone watching right now, get yourselves on that one next Monday.
Yeah, lovely stuff. Right, thanks so much, everybody. We will see you all again next Monday. And like I said, we do appreciate all of you joining us for now. Make sure you vote for us, and we'll see you all again next week. Bye-bye.